goes out to a brother who gave much love to the music. He gets much respect. Can you dig it?
We hear a lot of things in regards to climate change. And so today, we're actually going to talk a little bit about this. We have climate change deniers, and they're obviously on the payroll of the companies and the wealthy who want to keep exploiting and destroying the earth to get everything they can until there's nothing left. Absolute insanity. Some of these guys are heavily invested in technology. So someone has told them that if you keep investing in technology, you could probably live forever. And then other folks are just plain out to lunch. They don't like people. They don't like everyday people. They don't like the people who have made them wealthy. And quite honestly, the everyday person has made these folks wealthy. So if you can see the stuff up top where it talks about the world's richest individuals are responsible, very responsible for climate change. And also on the bottom, the wealthiest, something like 10% of the wealthy, their footprint, carbon footprint has been tracked, and they are responsible for major climate impact. Yet it seems like the everyday person is, for whatever reason, not getting that memo. I don't know if it's denial. I don't know if it's all the propaganda. It could be a combination of everything, or the part of denial where we just refuse to believe that people can be so rotten and so inhumane as to destroy and discard the entire planet. So let's jump right into it. There was a recent study published in Nature Climate Change, and it reveals that the top 10% of the world's richest individuals are responsible for 2/3 of the global warming since 1990. Okay? Since 1990, there's a few places you can find this information. Energy Reporters, you can go to MaWeb. Cornelius Today, it's got a little bit of information on it. So much more of that information. So what's interesting about this finding is that it underscores the impact of concentrated private wealth on extreme climate events. So here we are again, straight out of a comic book, the In Like Flint and Our Man Flint and, Matt Helm and all of that stuff. Dean Martin with his martini trying to stop these folks that are trying, that want to take over the world. And we all thought that was a joke, but apparently it's anything but a joke. So this finding underscores the impact of concentrated private wealth on extreme climate events, adjusting from the traditional carbon accounting to a more focused climate accountability. So they actually adjusted the study to get a better picture of not just what is causing it, but who is more accountable. All right. So this groundbreaking study, researchers directly linked carbon footprint of the wealthiest individuals to tangible climate impact. We talked about that. And what's interesting is that, we have a very dynamic market. And because our market is really dynamic, any sector of industry could actually boom. And I'll give you an example. Mining. We've heard a lot about, minerals and precious minerals and rare earth minerals and things of that nature. So mining and exploration could expand to colder regions. Why? Because they're thawing out. The permafrost reveals previous inaccessible mineral reserves. So they're finding out that there's more reserves out there. They couldn't get through the permafrost. Everything was just frozen solid. So it was ice. Now it's melting because of climate change. And so we're seeing other sectors or industry actually open up as a result. And we hear countries and nations now battling over mineral rights in certain parts of the world that seemed, that nobody really thought about it because it was just too difficult to get to, too expensive, etc. So here's the other part. This concept also applies to tourism as people flock to areas previously deemed too frigid or remote. Kind of like they call that last chance tourism. There's a rush to visit threatened locations like Venice, where rising sea levels foreshadow an uncertain future. So there's the other part, is areas that are being heavily impacted that, people actually live in. There were tourist sites, historical sites. That will also push tourism. Then there's a bunch of companies, that are popping up, or companies that are becoming key players that, that they're saying, now you need to watch these companies as a result of climate change, especially of these companies that are pouring in investments and solutions to actually mitigate climate effects. So I'll give you an example on that. This company called, Next Era Energy. Now, supposedly they're a leader in renewable solutions and anti-carbonation of power grids, along with green hydrogen to reduce emissions. You have another one, which we know, Tesla, right? Elon Musk, Tesla. So in addition to its electric vehicles, also creates solar energy and battery storage products. And so let's look at the key players in regards to this. Fossil fuel companies. Major oil and gas corporations benefit from continued demand for fossil fuels despite their role in climate change, right? You have the green technology firms. Companies developing renewable energy solutions such as solar and wind power, they're seeing increased investments as the world shifts towards sustainable practices. So it kind of sounds like maybe the United States with Trump and whoever's paying him, they decided that they're going to go against the green technology firms, which China seems to be embracing. So, but you never know. These guys sit on the boards and things shift around and they go unnoticed. They could all be the same players, and usually they are. That's how they hold the wealth, okay? There's insurance companies. As client-related disasters increase, insurers can charge higher premiums and expand their services related to risk management. And then, of course, let's not forget the wealthy individuals who we introduced in the beginning of the show. The richest 10% of the global population are responsible for a significant portion of carbon emissions and thus have a vested interest in maintaining their lifestyles, right? Which often contribute to climate change. So, Michael Jackson said, you got to make that change. The wealthy said, oh, you make that change. I'm putting the change in the bank. You make the change, we take the change, put it in the bank. Love that corporate welfare, right? So let's consider the economic landscape. The financial benefits of climate change, as they say, can kind of be complex because you get strange bedfellows. So we think together, right? So this is involving both direct profits from fossil fuels and indirect gains from transitions to greener technologies. Now, this is a representation of the relationship between economic interests and environmental impacts. Let me recite that. This is a representation of the relationship between economic interests and environmental impacts. They get you in the front, they get you in the back. Well, listen to this. Global warming is the long-term heating of the Earth's climate system, primarily due to human activities. And this is for those of you folks that keep hearing about it, but just didn't get the memo, right? Global warming observation began roughly around the pre-industrial period between like 1850 to 1900, right? Now, as of 2026, which is where we are right now, the scientific consensus remains clear. Human influence has unequivocally warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. You're seeing it. You're seeing the weather, the harsh weather, the floods, all of this. So, what are the core mechanics? Again, this is for the people who haven't gotten the memo, right? You have obviously the greenhouse effect, right? Human activities, specifically burning fossil fuels. If you don't know what fossil fuels are, coal, oil, and gas, all right? Deforestation and industrial agriculture release greenhouse gases, or GHG. And if you want to put S at the end, because it's gases, right? You got that. So what are the greenhouse gases? Some of them are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. Then we have heat trapping. Now, these gases act like a blanket, trapping solar energy in the atmosphere that would otherwise escape into space, right? Causing global surface temperatures to rise. So the way that the Earth handles its business is being disrupted by greed and insanity. So let's look at what's our status for 2026. The planet is currently warming faster than at any point in recorded history. And since they started, we're almost hitting that 3% mark. So we're like 3% warmer, and you're going, oh, it's only 3%. What about the other 97? A little bit here and there creates major conditions for us on planet Earth in regards to what we have been accustomed to. And if you think about it, the way that we live is about our environment and what our environment is, because our environment impacts us. We impact our environment impacts us. So we have a relationship. And right now we are disturbing that relationship because there's some really greedy, insidious players out there. Basically, it's almost like they're terraforming the world for something. All right. And I could go into like temperature records, but I think that I've done this. So this is the thing that I will say. We have 10 of the warmest years in historical records. And that's from 2014 to 2023. Okay. So those are the 10 warmest years. So we're heating up. And it's getting out of hand. And we're seeing the impacts. And, they talk about climate drivers, right? In 2026, the warming trend is being exacerbated by a strengthening of El Nino event, which naturally elevates global temperatures and alters weather patterns worldwide. One of the patterns, ocean heat. The oceans have absorbed the vast majority of excess heat, leading to record high ocean heat content, which fuels more intense storms, marine heat waves, and sea level rise. You live in Venice, the levels are rising. You live in Florida, hurricanes are getting much more intense, and you're having more. Sea level is rising, okay? We talk about the key impacts. Climate change is affecting every region on the Earth, which risks becoming increasingly complex and difficult to manage. And you don't manage the weather. You try to manage the weather as in regards to how it impacts your environment. And so there are people, yes, they dust the clouds and they put stuff in there and they try to get it to rain and they create some type of precipitation by dropping stuff up there. And that's a whole other conversation. We'll get to that one because it's my show and I got plenty of time, right? Extreme weather, increased frequency and intensity of heat waves, heavy precipitations, droughts, and tropical cyclones. We are seeing more than I ever saw when I was a kid, or maybe because we only had 3 radio stations, CBS, NBC, and ABC. There was PBS, right? And Trump loves PBS. Okay, all right. So getting to sea level rise, melting glaciers and thermal expansion of seawater threaten coastal communities and low-lying island nations with submersion and storm surges. Storm surges, we just talked about more storms and their intensity. Submersion, the islands are going under, right? We have a tremendous amount of ecosystem loss. Mass mortality events on land and in the ocean are occurring, with many species unable to adapt quickly enough to changing conditions, leading to local extinctions of many species, including people. All right. Then you talk about socioeconomic risk. Climate change reduces food and water security, displaces populations. It increases the spread of vector-borne diseases, and let's just say the spread of diseases, right? And places immense pressure on global infrastructure and economies. And so what is the path forward? Okay, let's try to figure out, how do we move forward? Well, you have the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and they emphasize that while the situation is urgent, the future is not yet fixed. In other words, they're saying, okay, it's not a complete done deal. Let's talk about mitigation, right? So deep, rapid, and sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions are required to slow the warming. This involves transitioning to renewable energy, enhancing energy efficiency, and protecting natural carbon sinks like forests and wetlands. All right. Here's the other thing. Certain things we're just going to have to adapt to, because we have taken everything a little bit too far. Because some warming is now locked in, societies must invest in resilient infrastructure, early warning systems for disaster, and sustainable urban planning to protect vulnerable populations. Okay. Global warming is driven by greenhouse gas, again, GHG emissions, across several interconnected sectors. While there are different ways to categorize these emissions by the activity that produces them or by specific industry, the sectors with the most significant impact are consistently those reliant on fossil fuels, and America is not giving it up because our politicians like that money. All right. So let's look at those top contributing sectors. Global emissions are primarily driven by the production of energy and the conversion of land for human use. Global emissions are primarily driven by the production of energy and the conversion of land for human use. Just want to make sure that you get it. All right, so primary drivers. Let's look at electricity and heat production. 34%. It's the burning coal, oil, natural gas to power homes, businesses, and industry. Industry and manufacturing are at 24%. So let's go back to the electricity and heat production. That's 34% industry and manufacturing, which is fossil fuels burned on site for energy, plus chemical processes, all right, which is, it could be, cement, steel production, right? All right. Agriculture, forest land use, that's 22%. And primarily livestock, which methane, yes, cows get gas too. Fertilizers, which uses nitrous oxide, and deforestation, wood, and more wood, right? That's at 22%. We get in transportation, they're at 15%. And transportation will be the combustion of petroleum-based fuels, like gas prices are going up, right? Gasoline, diesel, in-road, rail, air, and marine transport, ships, etc. Buildings, they're at 6%. Direct on-site emissions from heating, cooking, and cooling. All right. So again, we have these. We're in a race. There are things that we can do. So let's talk about key high-impact industries. When looking at specific industries rather than the broad economic sectors, several hard-to-abate areas stand out because they contribute significantly to global emissions while requiring complex technological changes to decarbonize. Going back to energy and fossil fuel, this time we're actually going to talk about energy fossil fuel extraction, okay? Fossil fuels companies are the primary suppliers of the energy used all across other sectors. Beyond the emissions released, when customers burn these fuels, the industry itself generates significant emissions through fugitive emissions, unintentional leaks, of methane during the extraction, refining, and transportation of oil and gas. All right. And we get into construction materials such as cement, iron, and steel. These industries are major emitters due to both high energy demands and chemical byproducts. Steel, producing iron and steel often involves high processes fueled by coal and chemical reactions that release CO2. Okay. Cement, the chemical process of creating of clinker, which I guess they say that's the main ingredient in cement. I just learned something myself, right? Inherently releases CO2 as a byproduct, independent of the energy used to heat the kindlings. All right. So carbon dioxide is a byproduct independent of the energy used to heat the kindlings. You have agriculture and food systems. The global food system, when viewed as a whole, and this is including processing, packaging, and transport, accounts for roughly 1/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions. All right. Livestock, we talked about that. Cattle and and others produce methane during digestion. Yeah, fertilizer. They use synthetic nitrogen fertilizers that releases nitrous oxide, which is a GHG. Okay, roughly 265 times more potent than carbon dioxide at trapping heat. Now, fashion and textile, right? The fashion industry is estimated to account for roughly 8% of the global climate warming emission. This impact is hidden and a cumulative total that includes agricultural emission from the cotton farming, the production of synthetic fibers, and that's derived from the plastics and chemicals industry, and the energy intensive global shipping and logistics required to move goods. Now, the numbers may vary. Just note that climate impact data can shift depending on how researchers are doing their calculations or assign their responsibility. Okay, so then you have direct versus indirect emissions. Some of the studies count emissions at the point of release, which would be power plant, while others assign those emissions to the end user. That's the factory using the electricity. We talk about gas types. Carbon dioxide is the most discussed, but industries like agriculture are major contributors of methane and nitrous oxide, which have a much higher warming potential per molecule than carbon dioxide. I know I'm giving you guys a lot of a lot of information for you to consider. I wish I could give you a lot of energy. Maybe this will give you the energy to actually rethink our future. Then we talked about, what we haven't talked about, but I had to throw this one in there. Data centers and high-tech manufacturing are major drivers of global energy demand and greenhouse gas emissions. So you've heard the complaints about data centers popping out. In the U.S., we'll probably have about 10,000 at the end of the year. And, we have about 3 times more or 4 times more than China. So when you get these politicians talking about China is beating us in data centers, we have 3 to 4 times more than they do. All right. And nobody else is even close to us. We got something else going on, probably worldwide surveillance, right? We're becoming the global surveillance state. And I'm sure it's your 10 richest folks that are all invested in this. And they're building fortresses and bunkers all over the world because they know stuff is going to go down, right? And they can never have enough real estate to protect their own ass. They don't care about yours, but they're going to protect their own. Anyway, so data centers, high operational impact. So we've had a lot of communities who have been complaining that they weren't getting risk assessments, that these data centers were just popping up. And then by the time they found out it was too late, they were already there. And my issue is that some of these data centers they're the size of small towns. And the other part is they're going to be blocking off a lot of road. We're not going to be able to go down this road, that road. They're carving up the United States. You're not going to be able to jump in the car and just travel. Now you're going to have to fly, take a boat. It's going to be very hard for us to move around because they're taking all the land. And if they take the land, they're going to block everything off. They're going to change highways, they're going to change freeways. And pretty soon they're trying to talk you out of driving. Okay. And yeah, they're going to say that you drive too much and that's greenhouse gas, but it's really the wealthy that are driving up the greenhouse gas. And right now they're so wealthy that they're operating outside of the power of the state, meaning the United States or China. They're that wealthy. You know, you got the 10 kings without a kingdom. And for 1 hour, they will give their power over to the beast because they will hate the whore and they will burn her. Yeah, you know, it looks more probable. And you figure out who those 10 kings are without a kingdom. But I can tell you right now, what's going on is bad news, right? So again, data centers, high operational output. Large data centers are currently the most carbon intensive per square foot to operate. Why? Massive energy and water use. And they're driving up our electric bills and they're charging us for it. They love corporate welfare. They want us to pay for it. And not only that, they're taking our water resources, trying to get us to pay more for it. They're taking our electrical resources and they're trying to get us to pay more for it. People, isn't enough enough? When are you going to get the message? Are you just going to let them continue to just run over you like this? They're taking our tax dollars to enrich themselves. They're cutting all of the benefits out of our democracy that aid the people who are the true infrastructure. They're saying they don't need you as an infrastructure anymore. They're going to rely on technology, which means they don't need you to exist anymore. We have a problem moving forward. You guys aren't getting the memo. We are in a war. We've been in a war for quite a long time. The actual civil war, you know, has been co-opted, and the corporate overlords have co-opted it, and they are waging war against all humanity, all right? So let's talk about massive energy and water use. A single hyperscale data center can consume as much electricity as 1,000 homes. There are towns that are way smaller than that. Do you understand that? They also require millions of gallons of water daily for cooling, which can strain local ecosystems. Come on, guys. What we're doing is not smart. High construction intensity data centers require heavy-duty foundations and specialized infrastructure, right? And studies show their foundation systems can produce 414% higher carbon emissions during construction compared to standard residential projects. So let me get this straight. We're not going to build homes for people, but we're going to build data centers for greedy corporate evil monsters that hate humanity. And then you're going to do the propaganda and say, oh, they're great people and they're bringing jobs. They're bringing jobs to a few people while they need them. That AI is just lurking to replace you. I love the racists who are talking about, you will not replace us. You've already been replaced. That archaic thinking of this evil tribalism that you have, it's been dead a long time ago. It has never worked. And you never see the face of the true villain, but you put a villain's face on your neighbor who has either the same or less. All I can say, one word, moron, okay? The impact of data centers functions as the backbone of the internet and AI, but their rapid expansion, fueled by the rise generative AI, has created significant energy and resource challenges. Really? Yeah. Massive electricity consumption. Data centers currently account for 1.5 to 2% of global electricity demand. Wait till they build them all, with projections suggesting this could reach 3 to 9% by 2030. Oh, it's going to exceed that. In some regions, such as Dublin or Frankfurt, they can already represent 40 to 80% of local electricity load, straining power grids. Dublin or Frankfurt. Going back to candles, are we? And electricity goes out, data center is going to be lit up like a star. You, on the other hand, matches are going to become very expensive. Trust me on that one. All right, because much of the world's power grid still relies on fossil fuels, This electricity usage translates to hundreds of millions of tons of carbon dioxide annually. AI-specific workloads are particularly intensive. Servers optimized for AI chips can consume 2 to 4 times more power than conventional servers. Let's talk about water scarcity, right? Because you've heard on the news that people are like, our water bills are going up and electricity, and they want us to spend more. So water scarcity. Data centers require millions of gallons of water daily for evaporative cooling to prevent equipment overheating. A significant portion of the water is sourced from local supplies. Yeah, they're taking all of your water and you can't have it, but they can. Often in water-stressed regions, creating localized environmental justice concerns. These cats care not about how you live. They will give you cancer. They will starve you to death. They will kill your food supply. They will flat out just have Trump's army come out and kill you for speaking out, okay? Electronic waste. The rapid turnover of hardware driven by the need for more powerful AI chips is projected to generate up to 2.5 million tons of waste annually by 2030, often creating hazardous disposal issues in lower income nations. And we're a state. So think about what that's going to do to our states. We're a nation of states, I should say. All right. So the impact of high-tech production, the semiconductor industry, chip manufacturing, is one of the most energy-intensive sectors in the world. Its impact on global warming occurs at every stage of the product cycle. Energy-intensive fabrication, producing a single semiconductor wafer requires extreme temperatures, high precision lithography, and continuous air filtration. A single 12-inch water fabrication plant can consume as much electricity as a small city. They are saying we're not important. Their data centers are. Okay, potent greenhouse gases. Beyond carbon dioxide from electricity use, the chip making processes utilize specialized gases such as perfluorocarbons, PFCs, for chemical etching and cleaning. Ooh, and some of those could be related to forever chemicals, right? These gases have a global warming potential thousands of times higher than carbon dioxide and are notoriously difficult to capture or mitigate, which means they're just going to poison you because for them it's about their dollar and they're going to go for what's cheaper, right? And you think Junior having one eyeball was bad, wait till he's got like 6 all in the middle of his forehead and he has 3 fingers on each hand and he's got 5 hands. This looks really bad, all right? This looks really, really bad, and they don't care. And here's the other part. Are you downstream, meaning that they're dumping stuff in your water and it goes into your drinking water? How does that work, right? There's a lot of questions, and they're not being answered. And they're trying to silence those people who are just asking the questions, not even pointing fingers. Scope 3 emissions, the embedded carbon in high-tech products, the emissions generated during the raw material extraction and manufacturing phase is often massive compared to energy the device consumes during its lifetime. Strategic shifts of sustainability. Well, now this gets interesting. As a regulatory pressure mounts, the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism and California's SB 253, the tech industry is moving from voluntary pledges to operational accountability. So we're just a little push, but trust me, when they start to figure it's going to cost them money, they're going to decide they don't want to do this, right? So there is so much more to this, all right? There is so much more to this. This is just unbelievable. And I could go on and on in regards to, what's happening regional, but we see this, okay? We see how it's impacting the rise in the cost of living, erosions of income, agricultural volatility, all of these things, which is, the economic consequences. We know how it's impacting our air quality. Man, you look at the Midwest, in the Midwest, this region is seeing a shift in severe weather patterns with tornadoes and hail activity moving further east. And in June 2026, massive storm systems caused extensive damage to crops in states like Illinois and Indiana, threatening agricultural yields. When we go to the South, and we will include Texas, this region is battling compound flooding, where intense moisture, heavy rainfall events overwhelm areas already parched by drought. And for example, parts of the Texas Hill County recently received over 27 inches of rain in a single week, triggering life-threatening floods. You look at the East and their national air quality, dense smoke from wildfires, both domestic and international, has frequently blanketed major metropolitan areas, including Chicago, Detroit, and New York, prompting widespread air quality alerts, high quality air alerts, or widespread air quality alerts, I should say. Let me get that all straightened out. I mean, not to mention it's causing infrastructure stress. Much of the nation's aging infrastructure, including flood mapping, drainage systems, and power grids, they weren't designed to handle this frequency of modern extreme precipitation and heat events. And that's kind of the problem. Our infrastructure is getting old as well. And I don't see the investment actually going to the infrastructure, only when they need to fix something, but never to shore up things or to make adjustments to climate change. And then, what does it cost, costing us? So annual costs last 20 years, 2006 to 225. The most standardized metric for U.S. climate costs comes from NOAA, which tracks weather and climate disasters and damages exceeding $1 billion. So they're throwing in their numbers. So if you look at it from 2000 to 2009, 6.7 events cost us $62.2 billion, right? From 2010 to 2009, 13.1 events cost us $99.5 billion. Now, this is crazy. This is a 4-year period. From 2020 to 24, we had 3 events average annually, and that's $149.3 billion that it cost us. So since 1980, U.S. has sustained 431 such events, which total, they adjusted it to, the cost is exceeding $3.1 trillion, all right? In 2024 alone, the U.S. experienced $27 billion disasters, resulting in $182.7 billion in damages, and that was well above the recent 5-year average. And then there's the hidden costs, right? And so if we look at it, economists emphasize that the numbers above significantly underestimate I guess it's not above, but the numbers that I just mentioned estimate the true economic toll. A 2026 study published in Nature found that U.S. emissions since 1990 have caused roughly $10 trillion in global damages, with approximately 25% of the economic dampening occurring within the United States itself, okay? And so this impacted labor productivity, extreme heat, workers' output, particularly in outdoor industries like construction and agriculture, right? Supply chain disruptions, volatile weather patterns create ripple effects across manufacturing and retail sectors. Health costs, increased respiratory issues from wildfire smoke and spread of vector-borne diseases, placing recurring stress on the public health system. I mean, this is absolutely insane. GDP losses, structural economic models suggest that if global temperatures rise by 3% Celsius by the end of the century, that's pretty high. That puts us somewhere around the 6% Fahrenheit, something like that. The world could face GDP losses ranging from 1% to over 30%. 1% to over 30%. Okay? So even a moderate loss of 2 to 3% of global GDP per capita is comparable to a permanent recessionary state. So we're going past recession and into deep depression from what they're talking about. And I could really go on. We could talk about the social cost of carbon. Man, this is insane. And in prisons for profits, high carbon footprint, by the way. Yeah, we need to get rid of those. And one thing is that they operate 24/7. So that's really huge. And again, I could take you all through the numbers, and I think I did. I think I did a pretty good job of breaking it down. You know, when we talk about extreme weather, 2014 to 2023 cost us more than $2 trillion in regards to hurricanes, floods, and heat waves. Historic emissions since 1990, that's cost us another more than $10 trillion. Okay, cumulative, mostly U.S. emissions. Wow, that's really a scary thought. GDP loss. Okay, warming up to like 3 degrees Celsius. Wow, this is labor loss, crop failure, and health. It's between 10% to 30% of GDP. Okay. So, and then again, I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but let's talk about these folks who keep denying. Okay. These are the people on the payroll. These are the people that are getting paid by the corporations that are lobbying them. This is absolutely insane, right? So, according to the CAP report, we're going to go by the CAP report, and you can look it up if you don't know what that is. And this is for the 119th Congress. There are 119 members, 24 senators, and 95 representatives who publicly deny scientific consensus on human-caused climate change, right? So it's the total count, 119 members, or 22% of Congress, right? 24 senators, 95 representatives. Here's the financial context. These 119 members have received a combined total of over 51 million in lifetime campaign contributions from the fossil fuel industry. Now, that's just the fossil fuel industry. I'm sure they received much more money, and who funds denial? Well, who funds denial? Man, you have, this is insane. So you have these think tanks, notably Robert Brule identifies as a climate change counter movement, consists of roughly 90 think tanks, advocacy groups, and trade associations. These organizations are underwritten by several key sources. I'm just telling you about the resource. The research was most notably by Robert Brule, and he identifies climate change counter movement consisting of roughly 90 think tanks, advocacy groups, and trade associations. These organizations are underwritten by several key sources, and the sources are conservative billionaires and foundations. Like we didn't know that one wasn't coming, or was coming, or whatever. Historically, individuals like the Koch brothers, of course, Charles Koch and, David's gone, have been central figures for using their private wealth to fund a sprawling network of think tanks such as Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation, and American Enterprise Institute to influence policy and public opinion. Yep. Mad. Take over the world. Fossil fuel corporations, major companies including ExxonMobil, don't they just keep spilling stuff all over the place, right? Have historically funneled millions into organizations designed to manufacture uncertainty about climate change. So first, you got the other guys that are just saying it's not there, and then the other ones are like, well, maybe if we just get them to waver back and forth, right? While some companies have publicly pledged to stop funding denialist groups under pressure, investigations show they continue to support industry trade associations that lobby against climate regulation. They're paying those politicians, these guys you voted in office. Guess what? You got data centers. They're sucking up all the energy. They could build 100,000 homes. They've built one big data center for some fat rich cat who's trying to move you off your land, starve you off, or just watch you die, or, poison you. Welcome to the world. Anonymous financial networks. Increasingly, funds are steered through, here we go, donor advised funds. They just always have these like acronyms, DAFs, right? It's DAFs. DAFs, baby. Not DAP, DAFs, right? at major financial firms like Fidelity, Schwab, and Vanguard. Financial firms, come invest with us. We love you. Yeah, whatever. Since 2020, these platforms have funneled over 171 million to nonprofits aligned with agendas that reject climate science, allowing wealthy donors to remain anonymous while supporting disinformation. I told you it's a war, period. They care not about you. The financial incentives, okay? The opposition is driven by an economic imperative to protect business as usual scenarios. Of course it is. If global climate policies such as carbon taxes or fossil fuel bans were implemented, these actors face significant financial risk. And believe me, it's either them or you, and they say it's going to be you. Protecting stranded assets, fossil fuel companies hold vast reserves of oil, gas, and coal in the ground assets or in-ground assets worth trillions of dollars. If the world shifts to net zero emissions, these reserves could become stranded assets worthless because they cannot be burned. Delaying climate action allows these companies to continue extracting, selling these resources for profit. Here's a good one. Maintaining subsidies and tax breaks. Yes, I must maintain my subsidies and tax breaks because you don't matter, and I just love to continue grifting. Continue grifting. It is America's the great grift, right? The fossil fuel industry benefits from massive government support that artificially lowers the cost of production, that artificially lowers the cost of production. In the U.S., federal tax provisions such as expensing of drilling costs and percentage depletion are expected to reduce federal revenue by approximately $12.9 billion between 2022 and 2026. And I'm sure it's already in there. These subsidies make fossil fuels artificially competitive against cheaper renewables. They are rigging what is supposed to be the free market. There's nothing free about the market. You have to buy into it, and those who have the money control the market. Avoiding regulatory costs. Nobody likes paying fines. Fees. Specifically, the wealthy detest having to pay for anything. They'd rather you pay for it. Climate action often involves internalizing the externalities, making polluters pay for the damage they cause by preventing carbon pricing, stricter emission standards, or mandates for renewable energy. These industries avoid the massive operational costs required to decarbonize their infrastructure. The cost of denial is borne by the public rather than the polluters. The cost of denial is borne by the public, which means we are paying for it in so many different ways, not just from our wallet, but we are paying for it. And you guys aren't mad about this stuff. You guys aren't mad about Trump's people grifting. Your president made about $6-7 billion since he came back to the White House. You guys, these MAGA morons, man. I mean, I guess they said that they will bow down to the devil, and you should too, right? Economic losses, climate-related disasters, and health impacts from air pollution already cost the U.S. economy an estimated $240 billion annually, roughly 40% of the nation's annual economic growth. So their way is to deny you health care so they don't have to pay for it, and you just keep getting sick, and you drop off, and you die, and that way they don't have to worry about that. That's how they offset that $240 billion annually. They deny you your rights. They deny you the services that you actually pay for as an American. They let some guy from the PayPal mafia come in and try to shut down, your democracy. How do you stand for this, America? I don't understand. What is the deal with you guys? Man. Projected burden by the next decade, these annual losses are projected to rise $360 billion on top of the $240 billion. So well over $500 billion, but it's probably more. And then they have the disinformation strategy. Critics note that these actors use tactics developed by the tobacco industry, casting doubt on scientific consensus to stall regulation, which has successfully delayed global climate policy for decades. Remember the Paris Accord? Trumpenstein monster took us out of that, right? In the United States, climate change denial, defined here as the public rejection of scientific consensus on human-caused global warming, remains a significant factor in federal and state politics. Okay, so they're saying that there's a percentage of the public that's rejecting it. All right, and I'm sure there some are, but let's go back to the political players. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance have both questioned or dismissed scientific consensus on climate change, right? Okay. Wow. The administration has prioritized fossil fuel expansion, rolling back environmental regulations, and appointing figures skeptical of climate science to key environmental oversight roles, such as, remember that Lee Zeldin guy, right? EPA administrator, and Dr. Wielicki, man, that was a rough name growing up. He's overseeing the U.S. Global Change Research Program. Okay, I mean, this stuff is insane. This is absolutely insane. And I have a lot of information, and I could actually go on, and I could name more players. But guess what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to cut it short because we've already ran longer than I wanted to. But I think that you get the point. Climate change is real. There's a lot of money being spent on getting you not to believe it or to question the science behind it. We've been looking at climate change since the Industrial Revolution. So this is nothing new. All right. And what it is that you've got some insane hawks out there that they're all for the money. And this is all about the money. And so here's what I have to say. America, we're on the wrong course. We need to start looking forward, doing the right thing, because there's a war going on. And on one side, you have the MAGA people who are with the Nazis and the fake Christians or the Christian right, and they want you to think that it's a black and white fight, that we're still in the Confederate, but those guys have been co-opted by the wealthy, and they're just being used, and they're expendable too. We have to chart a different path. We have an opportunity to make this a better place, but if we don't change now, there's no tomorrow, because these guys are insane. It's a zero-sum game. You don't even really know what they want. What it looks like to me that they want is absolute annihilation and destruction of humanity, because it's insane. They're going to go to space, but they know nothing. They know very little about the oceans of this Earth. We know less about this Earth, and you're trying to go to Mars. And all of this is just spectacle. And I have nothing against science, space travel, any of that. I'm a sci-fi guy, and I love the industry. But to me, it's very obvious we know so little about the planet that we're on and our own existence. It would be better to understand you first before you try to go out there. But they don't want to do that. And they got their reasons. And I know a lot of it's to show power and to show spectacle, and at the end of the day, as my friend likes to say, sleight of hand, they show you one hand while they steal from you with another. And that's what we're seeing. So I'm Michael P. America. Let's do better. Let's chart a new course. Let's make a better world. I am out of here.
The Michael P. America Show? Wow.